So there is tax on the trust come the end, if there is a sale. But who gets the benefit of the net proceeds after tax? It's the employees.
And presumably then, so it sounds like HMRC, is going to do quite well from if these are more widely, EOTs are more widely taken up, but also for the employees, if the business becomes more profitable and grows and does better, then, they're going to be rewarded as well.
Yes.
You get to Financial Freedom Day faster. That's the key. And then Financial Freedom Day becomes, if the business was making £1 million a year profit, you repay your loan over 5, 6, 7 years, and then your 50 or 60 employees have now got £1 million profit to distribute each year between them on top of the salaries. So all of a sudden, that's a really meaningful number when you're talking about 10, 12, maybe £20,000 a year is the potential distribution. I mean, if you were to say to employees, you have to work reasonably hard for 5 or 6 years, but then you have a £20,000 bonus every year, I think that's quite compelling.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. So is there anything that you'd say is overlooked when it comes to EOT? So you mentioned earlier about, it's important to have the legal side of things right, but what about the other side of it? So when you've got all the documentation and you are an EOT?
So it's not so much something that's overlooked, but it's easily missed, and that is communication. So communicating with your employees continually, up to the event, and then beyond, just as importantly. And that beyond bit requires, do you remember what we're doing? This is why we're doing it. This is where we're at. This is how much we're looking at on projections or whatever. This is where we're headed this year. Remind them about Financial Freedom Day. Just keep communicating the whole piece.
And are there challenges then in communicating some of this information, which, some people in the business or particular functions may never have seen, or, may be less comfortable with the numbers, for example?
Absolutely that. I was actually going to turn the question around on you and say that in our business, I was talking about employee ownership for about 3 years before we actually did it. And we did it 18 months ago. So there's a 5-year journey. At what point, if it's even been reached yet, do you believe the EOT is actually real?
For me, actually, I'd say 18 months ago was when I was thinking, oh, okay, so we've changed. We're in EOT. What does that mean for us? What does it mean for you? There was definitely a shift in how I felt about the business, and owning part of something is a different feeling than being an employee. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about it for a number of years, for me, it really sunk in once it had happened.
Right. Okay. And I think that's probably the important point here. If you can do an EOT to your staff without them even knowing. So you can run right up to the process of implementing it. And the day before, nominate 2 employees to be trustees, pick an independent trustee and go, ta-da, there you go, you own the business now. I would never recommend that, but that is possible. The point here is that the earlier that you communicate with people that you want to do this, and more importantly, what it means to them, the faster you get the value out of it. But I guess the tricky bit here is, we have in our business quite a few people who are good with numbers. We have lots of accountants, we have lots of bookkeepers, we have lots of tax people, and we have lots of engineers. So all capable of using and manipulating numbers. That may not be the same for every business. And you certainly have got administration functions around that and head office functions that will not necessarily be quite as familiar with using numbers. Plus there's the concept behind it. So this is not a one and done. This is not here's the EOT, 20-minute presentation, I've done my job. This is continual communication. This is every 2 or 3 weeks reminding people, picking one nuance of it and going into a bit more detail, creating a video, doing a PowerPoint presentation, doing a Q&A session, doing live Teams calls, whatever it is, it needs to be a constantly fed beast in order to get the value out of it before you've even got to the point of doing the trust. Having done it, what you need to bear in mind is you don't own the business anymore. The employees do. So they are now shareholders. So you have to treat them like shareholders. So the information belongs to them. So they have to have the information. So what's the financial performance? What's the strategy of the business? How are we doing? Where are we going next? Are we looking at acquisitions? Are we looking at everything is now the employee's responsibility effectively as shareholders. So you have to communicate that to them on a regular basis. And what we found quite tricky is individuals must hold the executive team to account by saying, it's our business, you promised the information, where is it? Because it's your business, so you need to get noisy if you're not getting the information that is yours. So that's the communication changes at the point of doing the EOT, but communication is absolutely vital right the way through this process.
And presumably, kind of, it's an ongoing. There's like no endpoint to communicating in that respect.
Absolutely not.
And so, I've got one question about it's kind of incentivization. So, if you want to incentive a particular area of the business, or for example, a senior leadership team, how does that change from kind of pre-EOT to once you are an EOT?
For me, it doesn't particularly change. The key element here is that the employees have to be treated as a class. So all employees own the business, so they therefore need to be treated fairly. Having said that, if you're in a business development role, it's quite natural to have commission. So that is the right structure. So sales commission, for instance, can still be and should still be a feature in your business, because that's the right way to incentivize that individual to do the best they can. It's also comparable with the market, and you've got to keep up with the market. But a senior management team, if you want to incentivize them to work together, make sure all of their teams are working together, making sure that everybody is pulling in the same direction for the benefit of the business, then you can incentivize them. And if you incentivize them by, you could offer them shares, or you could offer them a bonus. So it can be done in any way that you could have done it when you still own the business. The point here is you need to have a structure in place that is beneficial for the entire employee base, who are, remember, one class of business owners. So would paying a bonus be beneficial? That's the question. So normally you would say, the exec board would say, yes, it is important. I need my senior management team absolutely on their toes, working together across all the departments to get the best value out of the business. If we reach a particular point, then they get a bonus to say thank you. That's perfectly acceptable still.
And I have a question. So you said that that's perfectly acceptable. Who's making that decision though? Because you're not in control anymore. So what are the layers? What are the layers of decision making here?
That's a good question, because it comes back to the control point. So as a business owner, you can have carte blanche to go, I'm going to do this because I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, it's your money, so you can spend it pretty much however you like. Your reality now is you don't have control. So you have significant influence. So my thought process would be, you would talk to your exec board and say, this is the plan. Do you think it's a good idea? And you ask the question and wait for the answer, really, but you're building your business case as you go. If your margin is £5 million, should I incentivize our senior management team to get that margin, and then we control the overheads? If we get that £5 million margin, is it worth giving a £50,000 bonus for? Well, the answer is yes. Would you spend 50 grand to get 5 million? Yes, of course you would. So that's the board saying yes. That has to be ratified by the trust. 2 of your board have already said yes. Your employees may say no, but your independent trustee should look at it and say, well, it's in the best interest of the business to get a £5 million margin. So therefore, yes, I'll incentivize that team. So the answer is yes. You've now got 3 against 2. So therefore it's passed. So it comes down to you have influence, but your independent trustee is really important. Really, really important.
So you've really got to find the right, as you were saying earlier, the right person to sit in that role.
Yeah.
And are there any, potential negatives to becoming an EOT? I know you've obviously spoken about the kind of giving up control element. Is there anything else that you would?
Sorry. For me, giving up control is the biggest bit that you need to get comfortable with as a business owner. Once you're past that, there's then a more technical hurdle that can come and bite you, and that plays into your wheelhouse.
Which is
The 4-year.
Right. So, yeah. So to achieve the tax exemption for the founder, you need to have a 4-year window after you've made the sale, where you're continuing to trade. Okay. If the business is in any way in that possible place where it can fail, then if that eventuality happens, then tax benefits go away. Okay, so the capital gains tax would be due and payable, not on the day it fails, but by reference to the day when the sale happened. So that could be 3-4 years before. Okay, so you have to bear that in mind, and there'll be interest on that, potentially penalties on that. So that's the key one, is that if the business is on a downward trajectory, okay, then that's something that you really need to be mindful of. Okay, there are things that can be done because the company needs to carry on trading. Okay, nowhere does it say that it needs to carry on the same trade. So there are things that we can talk about with business owners, which enable them to maintain their position, but it does get tricky.
That's it. And the reality is, if that were to happen, you manage the downside like you would in any business. So you would, if your cost base is now too big for your revenue, you have to adjust your cost base if you can't change your revenue. And that's really difficult and awkward because it may mean redundancies. It may ultimately mean everybody is made redundant and the business as it looks now disappears. However, we would say to a business owner, the last thing you want to do is activate that capital gains tax kick from 2, 3, 4 years ago. So run the business as a consulting business. Get whatever revenue you can in, run it out for the remainder of the 4 years. And then if it's not working, then collapse the business after that 4-year qualifying period.
So the 4 years is very, very important.
It's really, really important.
Really important.
The tax bill arrives today, but it's dated the date you sold the business. So you've got late filing penalties, you've got late payment penalties, you've got interest. You could really easily get to the point where you're paying 50 or 60% more than the capital gains tax bill was to start with.
Okay, so would you say that it's important to forward plan? Like, how much planning should you do if you are now considering this and, thinking this is a good option for you as a kind of exit strategy?
I would say it's always important for a business to forward plan. You should be having I think a 5-year plan in the business that obviously gets more nebulous as it goes out towards the 5 years, especially if you're in a regulated market, because you don't know where the regulation is going. You've probably got a good idea where it's going in the next 24, maybe 36 months. So that should be a much more detailed level of plan. And then you should have a tactical plan about what you're doing for the next 4 quarters that's rolling. But all of that is what you should have in a business anyway. So the fact that you've got a potential tax bill and a penalty hanging over your head if you don't get it right isn't the right reason for doing a business plan. You should have a business plan, so you've got a way of telling your people, we're going this way, get behind the plan and support it. And then if you need a pivot, you need a pivot. That happens to lots of businesses. But again, if you've got a pivot, you need a plan, tactical plan for the pivot, and then a strategic plan that sits behind that.
Yeah. And the communication side of that, it's very hard to communicate to a bunch of employees and sell this whole concept to them if you haven't got that plan in place, and even more so if the plan that you do have in place shows decline. It's like, I'm going to sell this to you, but yeah, you might not want what you're getting in 3 years' time.
Yeah. Okay. So providing businesses do have that in place and the strategy and the plans, how long does it take to implement an EOT or make the shift?
It can happen as quickly as you can get the paperwork done, but we wouldn't advise that. I think the lead time has to be,
3 months minimum.
I would say longer.
Yeah, absolute minimum 3 months.
Just to get your head round what it is you're doing, and also to get the communication right, the pre-communication, to get people to buy into the whole idea.
Yeah, I mean, you could do this in 10 working days.
Should you?
Do this in 10 working days. I would think that it would be almost business suicide to do it, but it is physically feasible to do that. But let's just leave that alone, because that's never going to happen. We would say, absolute minimum 3 months. Because first of all, you need to get a business owner, or more likely 2 or 3 business owners, used to the idea and understand it, and understand how they still have control in their eyes. So there's significant influence, not control, but let's call it control, which is shorthand. They still need to know they're going to get their money, and what the structure looks like, and what their new reporting lines are. Because at the moment they don't have any, because they own the business. They now have people they're responsible to. They have a trust board and all the employees as owners. So that takes some getting used to for somebody who's used to running with autonomy. Then you need to get your staff up to speed. And that could be 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings over the course of 6, 8, 10 weeks to get everybody up to speed, so that every single person knows what it means to them, and importantly, how they fit in the organisation, and how all their colleagues fit. So how it all makes up the whole. Only when you've got all of that in place should you do it. Now, to do that in 3 months is, I would think, quite challenging, be quite intense, and reasonably disruptive in the business, which is the last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
So I think 6 months.
Yeah, you need to put that space in. You need to put that space and time in, because bad things happen when you rush things, particularly legal documents and relationships with staff. But also your staff need that time, particularly if 2 of them are then going to be part of this structure as trustees. There might be people who start off thinking, oh yeah, I'll be a trustee. But a slightly longer time scale will mean, actually, let's think about this, because then they've got their job going on at the same time, and thinking, well, actually, will I have the time? I probably will have the time, but actually, do I want this responsibility? So it's a sifting process as well for the employees, I think.